Your card was declined, sir. The receptionist's voice echoed through the lobby of a five-star hotel in Tenerife, Spain. My father stood there, face drained of all color, hands trembling as he held the credit card he'd always proudly shown off to his colleagues. I froze watching that scene. The man who always pounded his chest calling himself a six-figure consultant. The one who once told my grandfather, "You don't understand how money works," was now standing in the middle of a crowd of international tourists looking like someone who'd just lost everything. But what shocked me even more wasn't the declined card. It was the man sitting at the cafe next door, sipping his coffee, watching everything unfold with an impossibly calm expression. My grandfather, Robert Ellis, the one our entire family had left behind in Boston because we thought he wasn't a resort person. If you're watching this video, hit subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you will make you rethink the meaning of the word family. Let me start from the beginning, about how a winter escape vacation became the most expensive lesson of my father's life, and how I discovered that the person I should have treasured most was the one we'd disrespected the longest. My name is Claire Ellis, 21 years old, senior year accounting major at Boston University. My family lives in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, a family that from the outside, everyone thinks has it all. My father, Mark Ellis, 48 years old, works as a sales consultant for a medical equipment company. He loves suits, loves new cars, loves business trips to fancy hotels. My mother, Julia, 46, works as an office manager for a dental practice. And my little brother, Ethan, 14, is in middle school and doesn't yet understand the cracks running through our family. But there's one more person, the one this story is really about. My grandfather, Robert Ellis, 76 years old. He used to own a small auto repair shop in Boston for nearly 40 years. Not a big dealership, not a franchise, just a two-bay garage with a hand-painted sign reading, Ellis Auto Repair. He retired 6 years ago, sold the shop to his former apprentice, and now lives alone in a small house 20 minutes from us. I always thought he was the most ordinary man in the world, until I discovered that very ordinariness had been carrying our entire family for 20 years, and none of us ever said thank you. I remember this story because Grandpa told me one autumn afternoon while I was helping him clean out his garage. When my father was 23, fresh out of college with no credit history, he wanted to buy a used Honda Accord to get to work. The bank rejected him because he had no credit history. The only solution was to have a co-signer. Grandpa agreed. "Just don't miss payments, all right?" he told Dad. "When my name is on it, your mistakes hit my credit too." Dad nodded dismissively. Yeah, I got it." Not a single word of thanks, as if Grandpa putting his entire 30-year credit history on the line for his fresh-out-of-college son was just something he was supposed to do. Grandpa said nothing more. He signed. A few years later, at a summer family BBQ, one of Dad's friends came over. He saw Grandpa grilling burgers in the corner of the yard and asked, "Your dad's a mechanic? That's cool, man. I wish I knew how to fix cars." My father laughed, but that smile was so forced I still remember it even though I was only 8. "He just runs a small shop, nothing big. I'm trying to get out of that kind of life." Trying to get out of that kind of life. I was standing by the soda table, heard every word. And I also saw Grandpa standing not far away, tongs in hand, his back slightly stiffening. He said nothing. He just quietly flipped the burger and changed the subject to the weather. But I know he heard, and I know it hurt. When my parents decided to buy a house, Dad was 31, had been working a few years but still didn't have a high enough credit score to get a mortgage alone. Once again, the bank required a co-signer. Once again, Grandpa signed. "It's just paperwork, Dad," my father said, voice full of the confidence of someone who wasn't worried at all. "You're not actually paying anything." Grandpa looked at him, his expression hard to read. "Paperwork can ruin a man too, Mark." Dad waved his hand. "Don't be dramatic." That house, the house I grew up in, the house with the backyard for BBQs, the house Mom decorates every Christmas, Exists because Grandpa's name was in the loan file. But no one ever mentioned it. Never. About 5 years ago, when I was 16, I was doing homework at the kitchen table when Grandpa stopped by. He saw Dad scrolling through his iPad, looking at an Audi Q7 on a dealership website. "You're thinking about another car, Mark?" he asked gently. "Yeah, the old one's getting boring." "Didn't you just pay off the last one?" "I'm leasing this time. It's smarter." Leasing means you're always paying, never owning. And then my father said something I'll never forget. "Dad, you ran a tiny garage your whole life. I'm dealing with six-figure contracts now. You don't understand how money works these days." The kitchen went silent. I looked at Grandpa. He set his glass down on the table, very gently, very slowly. "Maybe I don't." Then he stood up, told my mother he had to leave early, and drove away. No one in my family, including me, said anything to defend him. We let him walk out with those words weighing on his shoulders. I hate myself for that. Over the years, I gradually realized Dad didn't just ask Grandpa to sign once. Credit line for business, Grandpa signed. High-limit credit card, Grandpa signed. Loan for the third car, Grandpa signed. Every time Dad would say, "It's just a formality. They just need a backup name." Every time Grandpa would sign, and every time Dad would forget to say thank you. I once asked Grandpa, "Grandpa, why do you keep helping him?" He looked at me with a sad smile. "Because he's my son, Claire, and I keep hoping one day he'll understand." Understand what? That a name isn't just letters, it's everything you've built, everything you are. I didn't understand then. Now I do. December last year, Boston was buried in snow. Temperature dropped to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, streets white as far as you could see. And my father started complaining. "I can't take this cold anymore. We need a vacation." Mom agreed immediately. Somewhere warm, beach, no snow. Dad searched online for several nights and finally announced excitedly, "Tenerife, Canary Islands, Spain. December weather is like 75 degrees. European vibes, perfect." Ethan, my little brother, jumped up. "Spain? We're going to Spain?" "We deserve this," Dad said, voice full of pride. "I've worked hard all year." I sat quietly, saying nothing. But there was a question in my mind. That evening, while the family was discussing booking flights, I asked, "Are we asking Grandpa if he wants to come?" Dad stopped typing, looked at me like I'd said something absurd. "Your grandfather? Claire, he hates flying. You know that." "But have you asked him?" Mom chimed in. "Plus, he's not really a resort person. He'd just sit in the room and complain about the food. Let him stay home where he's comfortable." "He's 76, Dad added, as if that was reason enough to end the discussion. "A long flight like that isn't good for someone his age. We'd spend half the trip worrying about him." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that Grandpa still drives, still walks every morning, is still healthier than many 60-year-olds. But I didn't. I stayed silent, like always. And the family continued planning the trip without anyone bothering to call and ask him. A few days later, I stopped by Grandpa's to drop off some cookies Mom had baked. During our conversation, I accidentally mentioned, "We're going to Spain for Christmas break, Grandpa." He was pouring tea, his hand pausing for a second. "Spain, huh? Tenerife?" I was surprised. "You know it?" "I've been around." "Really? You've been to Tenerife?" He smiled, a smile I couldn't quite read. "A long time ago. Beautiful place." I waited. Waited for him to ask, "Why didn't you invite me?" Waited for him to look sad, angry, or disappointed. But he said nothing more. He just poured tea into my cup and asked about my finals. When I drove home, I felt like something was wrong, but I didn't know what. December 20th, our family landed at Tenerife South Airport. When I stepped off the plane, I immediately understood why people call this place winter escape paradise. 73 degrees, brilliant sunshine, sea breeze caressing my face. After 2 weeks buried in Boston snow, It felt like being reborn. "This is the life," Dad said, taking a deep breath. "This is what working hard gets you." Mom laughed, linked arms with Dad, took selfies with the lush palm trees behind them. Ethan ran around, excited like a kid entering Disneyland. And me. I looked at it all and wondered what Grandpa was doing in Boston right now. Our resort was in Costa Adeje, the most luxurious area of Tenerife. Infinity pool overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, suite with private balcony, breakfast buffet with champagne and fresh oysters. I looked around the lobby. White marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff in crisp black uniforms bowing to every guest. This was the kind of place Dad always wanted to belong. The world of successful people, people with money, people who made it. My mother took a deep breath, eyes lighting up as she looked at the pool. "This is beautiful, Mark. You outdid yourself." Dad flashed that smug smile, the one I'd seen hundreds of times whenever he felt superior to others. During check-in, Dad turned to me and Ethan, voice full of pride. "Took a lot of work this year, but we made it here. This is what Ella's family does. We aim high." I nodded, but inside a small voice said, "Ella's family? Or just Grandpa's credit?" I pushed that thought away. This was vacation. I should be happy. But fate has its own way of reminding me of the truth. Our first evening, Dad booked a table at Mar Azul, a famous seafood restaurant right on the beach. According to TripAdvisor reviews, it was one of the best places to enjoy lobster and Spanish white wine. We arrived at 7. Sunset was fading over the ocean, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Staff led us through the outdoor terrace, where white wooden tables were elegantly arranged with candles and flowers. And then I saw him. A man sitting alone at a corner table, back turned, gazing at the sea. A glass of white wine in his hand, candlelight flickering on his silver hair. My heart pounded. No way. I stopped dead, causing Mom to almost bump into me. "Claire, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I walked toward that table, legs feeling numb. "Grandpa?" The man turned around. My grandfather, in a light blue linen shirt, light khaki pants, looking like a regular visitor to the Mediterranean. Not the lonely old Boston man watching TV that I'd imagined. He squinted, smiled. "Didn't expect to see you here, kiddo." Dad stood frozen, mouth open, but no words coming out. Mom gripped Dad's arm, eyes wide. Ethan whispered, "Grandpa's here? How?" But what made everything even stranger was the restaurant staff's reaction. The manager approached, bowing respectfully to Grandpa. "Buenas noches, Señor Ellis. Your usual table is ready. Would you like to move to the larger one tonight?" Your usual table, Señor Ellis, as if he were a regular, as if he'd been coming here for years. Dad looked at the manager, then at Grandpa, then at me, face a chaos of surprise, confusion, and something like anger. Grandpa stood up, polite as a gentleman. "You're welcome to join me. The food's good here." Mom smiled awkwardly. "Robert, what a surprise. We didn't know you were traveling." "I didn't mention it," he replied softly, offering no further explanation. Dad still stood silent, jaw clenched, as if holding something back. But it was hard to refuse when the manager was watching, when other guests were watching, when everything seemed like Grandpa was the host and we were the guests. The whole family sat down at the same table. That dinner, I don't remember what I ate. I only remember the tense silence between Dad and Grandpa. And Grandpa's calm smile, the smile of someone who knew something we didn't. On the way back to our room, Dad pulled me aside. "Did you tell him we were coming here?" "No, Dad. I didn't even know he'd been to Spain." "This doesn't make sense." Dad shook his head, irritated. "What is he trying to prove, following us here? Is this some kind of guilt trip?" I looked at Dad, not believing my ears. "Dad, the restaurant manager knew him. He has a usual table. He wasn't following us. He's been coming here. Maybe longer than we know." Dad was silent for a moment, then waved his hand. "Whatever. It doesn't matter. This is our vacation. Don't let him ruin it. Ruin it. He wasn't invited to come with us, came on his own, and somehow was still considered the one ruining things. I wanted to scream, but I just nodded and went to my room. That night, I lay awake. I remembered all the times Grandpa had been overlooked. Last year's Thanksgiving, Dad invited a bunch of friends over, but forgot to call Grandpa. Dad's birthday 2 years ago, the whole family went to an expensive restaurant. Grandpa wasn't invited because crowded places are too noisy. He doesn't like that. My high school graduation, Grandpa sat in the very last row because Dad said the front rows were for immediate family. And now, Spain. How far had we pushed him away without realizing? The next morning, Dad eagerly went down to the front desk to book additional services. I want to book the yacht tour tomorrow, and the spa package for my wife. Oh, and can you arrange a private dinner on the beach? The receptionist typed, swiped the card, then stopped. I'm sorry, sir. Your card was declined. Dad laughed, as if it were a technical glitch. Try again. It's probably just a glitch. She swiped again, same result. Still declined, sir? That's impossible. Dad pulled out another card. Use this one. Declined. Third card. Declined. I stood nearby, watching Dad's face drain of all color. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands trembled slightly as he stuffed the cards back in his wallet. There must be some mistake. I'll call my bank. Dad went to a corner of the lobby, called the bank in the U.S. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I saw Dad sink into a sofa, phone pressed to his ear, face pale as a sheet. Then he opened his email. Then he read. Then he collapsed. I ran over. Dad, what happened? Dad handed me his phone, hands shaking like he was holding ice. Email from Chase Bank. Important. Credit line suspended. Your revolving credit line ending in XXXX has been suspended effective immediately. The secondary guarantor on your account, Robert J. Ellis, has formally withdrawn his guarantee as of December 18th. Due to your current individual credit profile, we are unable to maintain your previous credit limit. Your available credit has been adjusted accordingly. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss your options. I read it again. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time, every word drove deeper into my mind like a nail. Robert J. Ellis has formally withdrawn his guarantee. Grandpa. He had withdrawn his guarantee. December 18th, 2 days before we flew out. He'd done this before we left Boston. He knew exactly what would happen. And he still came here, sat at his usual restaurant, waiting for the storm to hit. Dad sat there, staring into space. He pulled out. Dad pulled out. 2 days before we left. Dad? I didn't know what to say. Do you understand what this means, Claire? Dad's voice trembled. Without his guarantee, my credit line is cut by 70%. I can't pay for this hotel. I can't pay for the flights. I can't even access my backup cards because they're all linked to that line. I looked out the window. Grandpa was sitting at the poolside cafe, drinking espresso, reading a newspaper. Calm, as if nothing had happened. And then I understood. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't coincidence. He came here to witness. Dad charged down to the cafe like a storm. I ran after him, trying to stop him, but too late. Grandpa was still sitting there, folding his newspaper, when he saw Dad coming. Mark, good morning. Good morning? Dad roared, not bothering to keep his voice down. Several guests turned to look. Did you cancel your guarantee on my accounts? Grandpa looked straight into Dad's eyes. Yes. One word. No explanation. No apology. Dad looked like he'd been punched in the face. You just froze my life, Dad. I can't pay for this trip. I can't pay my mortgage next month. I can't pay my car lease. Why would you do this to me? To your own son? Grandpa was silent for a moment. Then he pointed to the chair across from him. Sit down, Mark. I don't want to sit down. I want answers. Then you'll stand while I talk. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who'd lived 76 years and had nothing left to fear. Dad stood still. Do you remember your first car? Grandpa began. What does that have to do with anything? Humor me. Dad sighed. The Honda? Yeah, so what? I co-signed that loan when you were 23. You never thanked me. You never even acknowledged that without my signature, you couldn't have gotten it. That was 25 years ago. And then your first house. I co-signed the mortgage. You told me it was just paperwork, that I wasn't actually paying anything. Dad opened his mouth to say something, but Grandpa continued. And then your credit line, your business account, your second car, your third car, every time I signed. Every time you acted like it was nothing, like my name was nothing. Grandpa stood up, stepped closer to Dad. Do you remember what you said to me 5 years ago, Mark? In your kitchen, in front of your daughter? Dad didn't answer. You said, Dad, you ran a tiny garage. You don't understand how money works these days. Silence. And do you remember the barbecue when you told your friend you were trying to get out of that kind of life? The life I built? The life that paid for your first car, your first house, your credit? I stood a few steps away, hearing every word, heart aching. Grandpa paused, looked straight into Dad's eyes. A guarantee, Mark, is trust written in ink. You put your name on it, you put your life on it. I trusted you with my name for 25 years, and for 25 years, you used it while being ashamed of the man behind it. Dad stood there, unable to say a word. You broke the trust. I simply took back the ink. Sea breeze blew through. Waves lapped gently at the shore. I didn't do this to destroy you, Grandpa continued, voice softer. I did this because you're 48 years old. You're not a kid anymore. If you want credit, earn it under your own name. Build your own history. Pay your own debts. But I can't. You can. You just never had to, because I was always there to sign for you. Grandpa picked up his newspaper, folded it neatly. I won't let you risk my name anymore while treating me like a burden. That's not how family works. At least not the family I want to be part of. Then he walked away. Dad stood alone in the middle of the cafe, before the curious eyes of guests all around. And for the first time in my life, I saw Dad cry. That afternoon, while Dad and Mom were scrambling to call banks, credit card companies, and even lawyers, I went looking for Grandpa. He was sitting on the beach, watching the sunset. Can I sit with you, Grandpa? He nodded. Always. I sat down beside him, warm sand beneath my feet. Are you okay with all this? He laughed, the calm laugh of someone who's lived long enough to no longer be afraid. I'm fine, Claire. I've lived long enough to know when to stop co-signing bad habits. But Dad, he's really struggling. He's struggling with the consequences of choices he made. That's different from struggling with life. He looked at me. Do you know how I started my shop? I shook my head. I was 19, no money, no family to help. I borrowed $500 from a man I worked for, paid him back in 2 years with interest. Then I borrowed again to buy tools. Paid that back too. Then a small loan for the lease. Every dollar I ever had, I earned. Every mistake I made, I fixed myself. He picked up a seashell, turned it in his hand. No one co-signed for me, Claire. I built my credit from zero. I built my reputation from zero. And when I had something to give, I gave it to your father. I thought I was helping him. You were helping him? No, I was enabling him. There's a difference. He sighed, gazing far out to sea. Helping someone means giving them tools to stand on their own feet. Enabling means carrying them so long that they forget how to walk. I thought about that. About all the times he signed. About all the times Dad took it for granted. I should have stopped years ago. But I kept hoping. Hoping he'd change. Hoping he'd see me as more than just a signature, more than just a safety net, more than just the old man who runs a tiny garage. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there beside him, watching the sun sink into the sea. Grandpa, how do you know this place so well? He smiled softly. Your grandmother and I came here on our honeymoon. 53 years ago, before your father was born, before the resort was built. It was just a small fishing village back then. I was stunned. I didn't know this. No one in the family had ever mentioned it. We promised each other we'd come back every 10 years, and we did, until she passed. He looked out at the sea. After that, I kept coming, alone, every December, to remember her. Dad doesn't know? I never told him. He never asked. My heart ached. He'd been coming here every year, alone, to remember Grandma, and no one in the family ever knew. No one ever asked. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I'm sorry we never asked. He patted my shoulder. You're asking now. That's enough. The following days were a nightmare for Dad. He had to call the bank in the U.S., explain the situation, request an emergency advance. Denied. He had to contact credit card companies, request a temporary limit increase based on payment history. Denied because individual credit profile insufficient. He had to cancel the yacht tour, cancel the spa, cancel the private beach dinner. I saw Dad sitting in the hotel room, phone pressed to his ear, voice pleading with whoever was on the other end. Please, there must be something you can do. I'm in a foreign country. I have a family here. But banks don't care about circumstances. They only care about numbers. Mom complained all day. We should have never come here like this. This is humiliating. What will people think when we can't even pay for basic services? Ethan didn't understand what was happening, only knew that suddenly we couldn't do the things we'd been promised. And Dad sat in the room, calling person after person, trying to find someone who could help him. But no one could help. Because for the first time in 25 years, Dad had to face reality. His credit, his financial reputation, barely existed without Grandpa's signature. The third evening in Tenerife, Mom, Dad, and Ethan went to eat at the hotel's buffet restaurant, the only place already prepaid. I didn't go with them. I went to Mar Azul, where Grandpa was still sitting at his usual table. Can I join you, Grandpa? He nodded. We ordered seafood, white wine, a small glass for me, and sat looking at the sea. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it? Cutting him off like that? He thought for a moment. I regret not doing it sooner. I regret letting him use my name while disrespecting everything it stood for. But this? He shook his head. No, this is long overdue. What if he never forgives you? Then that's his choice. But I'd rather be unforgiven and respected than forgiven and used. That sentence stayed with me forever. On our last day in Tenerife, before heading to the airport, Dad went to find Grandpa. I stood at a distance but could still hear. Dad, I need to talk to you. Grandpa stood up, facing him. I know I haven't been the best son. I know I've said things, done things. Silence. Can you reconsider? The guarantee? Just for a few months, until I figure things out? Grandpa looked at Dad for a long time. No. Dad, please. Mark, you're 48. You have a job. You have a family. You have everything you need to rebuild. What you don't have is someone to blame anymore. He placed his hand on Dad's shoulder. I'm not abandoning you. I'm giving you a chance to become the man you should have been 20 years ago. Dad bowed his head. I don't know if I can. You can. You just have to want to. Grandpa turned away, and for the first time, I saw Dad not try to argue back. We returned to Boston in silence. The following weeks were difficult. Dad had to sell the Audi, buy an older car, had to cut expenses, had to talk to the bank about restructuring the mortgage. For the first time in his life, Dad had to live within his actual means, not the means guaranteed by someone else. Mom was unhappy, but gradually had to accept it. Ethan still didn't fully understand, but he noticed that the family was changing. After returning from Tenerife, I visited Grandpa every week. Not out of obligation, because I wanted to. We talked about everything, my work, my studies, my future. He told me about his youth, about Grandma, about the years building the garage from nothing. and I learned more from him than all the previous years combined. Grandpa, what's the most important thing you've learned in life? He thought for a moment. That your name is all you have. Your word, your reputation, your integrity. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose a job and find another. But if you lose your name, if people can't trust you, you've lost everything. Is that why you pulled out? To protect your name? Partly. But also to teach your father that his name should mean something too. He's been borrowing mine for too long. It's time he builds his own. 6 months after the Tenerife trip, everything had changed. Dad still worked, but more humbly. He no longer bragged about 6-figure contracts. He learned to live within a budget. He even started fixing small things around the house himself, something he'd always hired others to do before. And most importantly, he started calling Grandpa. Not to ask for anything, just to check in. How are you, Dad? I'm fine, Mark. How's work? Short calls, awkward, but real. That was a start. This year's Thanksgiving, for the first time in many years, Dad personally invited Grandpa to our home. Dad, we're having dinner on Thursday. I want you to come, please. Grandpa was silent for a moment on the phone. I could imagine him standing in his small house, looking out the window, thinking about the past 25 years. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And Dad, I want you to sit at the head of the table, where you belong. He came. I opened the door when he arrived. He wore a plaid button-down shirt, clean khakis, simple as always, but something was different. He stood straighter, walked more confidently. As if finally, after all these years, he no longer felt like an outsider in his own family. The dinner wasn't perfect. There were still awkward silences, still glances that didn't know where to look. Mom was still learning to accept the new, less luxurious life. But Grandpa sat at the head of the table, not in the corner like years before. And when Dad stood up to carve the turkey, he said, "Before we eat, I want to say something." The whole table went silent. Dad, I'm sorry, for everything, for the things I said, for the way I treated you, for taking your name for granted. Grandpa looked at Dad, said nothing. I know I can't undo 25 years, but I want to try, to be better, to earn your respect, not just your signature. Silence. Then Grandpa nodded. That's all I ever wanted, Mark. That's all I ever wanted. A year after the Tenerife trip, I graduated from college. The ceremony was on a beautiful May day. Dad, Mom, Ethan were all there, and Grandpa, sitting in the front row. When I walked up to receive my diploma, I looked down and saw him. He wasn't clapping louder than anyone, wasn't cheering. He just sat there, smiling, eyes full of pride. That was the moment I understood. Family isn't people who share your blood. Family is people who show up, people who care, people who teach you the value of a name, a promise, a signature. After the ceremony, I went to his side. Thank you, Grandpa, for everything. He hugged me. You earned this, Claire. All of it. Under your own name. I laughed, tears rolling down my cheeks. I learned from the best. If you found this story meaningful, please like and subscribe to follow more stories. And let me know in the comments, if you were Grandpa Robert, would you have withdrawn the guarantee? Or would you keep signing? I want to hear your answer.